Buenos dias, and hey now, PASW staff, clients, and friends joining us. I'm in a Mexican mood today. I'm half Mexican, just so you know. But that has nothing to do with this class. I just thought that it's going to be fun because we're going to be talking about somebody, a Mexican composer, arranger that was so ahead of his time. I have to give a shout out to my brother. Sebastian introduced me to this guy's music. He used to play it, I think, in junior high or maybe high school. And he'd play it around the house very loud, and I think everybody in our family was very intrigued by the sounds coming out of the speaker because it's unlike any other music you'll hear. People call it lounge music. People call it space age music. People call it the Busby Berkeley of cocktail music. Now, we get that reference, don't we? Who's Busby Berkeley? We looked at him last week. The famous director with all those geometric kaleidoscope images. And if we were to put music to that, I think that's a good comparison. He is the Busby Berkeley of cocktail music. So get a martini or a Bloody Mary, or, it's early, so don't get anything, actually. We're going to have a really fun time listening. I really just want you guys, I really want to just play you my favorite stuff, and we'll talk about his life, of course. But first you need to, know who I'm talking about. We're going to be talking about Juan Garcia Esquivel. Esquivel, 1918, born in Tampico. So we were in Georgia with Little Richard, right? We got to get the hell out of Georgia, and we got to go down to Mexico. We're going to go to Tampico, Mexico. This is where Esquivel's born. He lives a long life. He dies at 83, dies in 2002. So lives a long time, and as you're going to see, as you're going to hear, I mean, the music is very out there, very, it's jazz, Latin, lounge music. It's, he grows up in Mexico City for the most part. When he's 10, his family moves there. But he's self-taught as a piano player. He's a piano prodigy. He learned from recordings and learned from books. And by the time he was 17, he was a band leader in Mexico. And by the 40s, he had made a name for himself as a leader of a 22-piece orchestra, and that was on the radio. So all these things you're hearing are his arrangements. And when there's a piano, that's him playing the piano. All the arrangements are tightly orchestrated, except when you hear the piano, that's improvisation. That's improvised by him. He meets a comedian when he's young, and Penseco. Of course, we all know Penseco's, right? Famous comedy album. No, maybe he was really funny, but he starts writing background music for this comedian guy in Mexico. And he forms a small band and provides background music. But Penseco said, I want you to write music that is, he would give him scenarios, like write kind of funny music for me. And he would say, write like a Russian guy is walking in China. And Esquivel would have to think, well, what would a Russian guy walking in China sound like? And Esquivel said that's when his imagination started sparking with different ideas of surreal, absurd, quirky, colors in his head. He was very influenced by Van Gogh because he loved all the colors Van Gogh used. And Esquivel used, as you can hear, colors are just pulsating out of the music. So he kind of got a good following in Mexico with leading this band, and then was discovered in the United States and brought to record in about 1957, and starts recording in Hollywood, moves to Hollywood, and the album, his big album, Other Worlds, Other Sounds, comes out. in 1959. I don't know what brings me back to this year all the time, because I know John Pays has pointed it out, and it's true. I should write a book at some point. 1959. It seems like everything happened, but we're not going to talk about every single event. But musically, in 1959, when this album comes out, what's on the top charts? Mac the Knife, Bobby Darin. That's on the top. Another one, another favorite of mine, Venus by Frankie Avalon. That's on top of the charts in 1959. And of course, we know the most famous jazz album that changed the whole world is Kind of Blue, right? By Miles Davis. That comes out in 1959. So this is when Esquivel is on the scene in America. So he's kind of one of the founders of lounge music. And it's almost hard to describe lounge music without just listening to it, you know? So it's lounge, jazz, and Latin flavors. But what does that mean? How do you get that sound? So the arrangements, the orchestrations, very flashy, full of textures, but they're changing all the time. There's nothing that kind of gets too... He doesn't really just let things kind of vamp. There's splashes everywhere, including voices, and including syllables that are ooh, wah, wah, or pow, or all these words that, you know, are kind of gibberish, but he said that he would make himself... he would crack himself up when he was writing the charts, because he thought it was just so humorous of, well, instead of having lyrics to the song, why don't we just use the singers as instruments, kind of, and just make them have sounds. He would use kind of a traditional, you know, saxophone, brass band, but guitars and xylophones and electronic instruments, but they didn't have synthesizers really, so he would kind of create his own synthesizers by, I mean, he used a lot of percussion instruments, and all those piano runs are him, those virtuistic piano runs. You know, it's instrumental pop music that's not really... he would cover, you know, he wrote a lot of the music, but then he would also cover very famous songs as well. But obviously they would sound nothing like... his music sounded nothing like anybody else's music. So it's very idiosyncratic, meaning he was very obsessed with perfection. And everything was very tightly orchestrated, even though it sounds... Well, I don't know. It sounds like a mess, but it's a controlled mess. It's not avant-garde at all, for the most part. It's exotic. There's a lot of exotic percussion. You hear a lot of zuzu syllables, harpsichords. I mean, he would throw anything out there, and he said that RCA gave him freedom to do whatever he wanted. And also his recording style was very innovative. I don't quite understand this, but he would have two orchestras, two bands in different studios, and he would be in the middle, and they would kind of do this like virtual, like, they would do this simultaneous recording together. So he was very interested also in the studio, and Phil Spector was very influenced by Esquivel, particularly with his use of stereo and mono and panning. And if you're listening to this on headphones, you'll hear that there's music that goes this way, and I mean, it's just so much fun. It's a cacophony. It's a circus of just fun music. Sinatra loved this. I mean, he was really big in the 50s and 60s and created a whole genre of music. I mean, you never hear these instruments anymore, or at least back then, with a theremin. I mean, he's using just stuff to get these sounds that are so brilliant and so clever, so quirky, but so much fun, right? I mean, for the most part, is it musical? Highly musical and highly fun. Some of it can remind us of Predis Prado that we did months ago. Remember the band leader, Predis Prado? Those were Latin big band music, and his arrangements were incredible. Esquivel has taken this to a whole different realm, in a way that's... He's literally throwing all the bells and whistles in his music. He was a very serious musician, loved conducting, loved being a band leader, loved the spotlight, married 6 times, pretty into alcohol and drugs later in his life, and that's when he moved from Hollywood back to Mexico. Married his nurse, and died of a stroke, but I think he had quite a life. He said that what I tried to do was not to follow the style. He said he never wanted to follow the style of what was popular at that time. And that's interesting because those are the people that stand out. Those are the people when you try to be like everybody else, sometimes you get lumped in with everybody else. So I think with art, it's good to stand out. And it's funny that he used his name Esquivel with an exclamation point. He spelled it with that. Who else said I write my music with an exclamation point? Come on, this is the class. I got to quiz you. Who said I liked writing my Wagner, right? Wagner said that I write music with an exclamation point. Well, Esquivel spelled his name with an exclamation point. And isn't it very fitting? The music sounds like that. So he really wanted to make sure that his music, and it's weird, you would think to get a following or to be popular or whatever, that you would follow what's popular at that time. But he completely didn't want to follow what was popular at that time. And that made him stand out, and that worked to his favor. And that's why I'm doing a class on him in 2020, when this music came out in the 60s. That's why we're still talking about him. So stand out in your art. Do what's popular sometimes. Steal a little bit of popularity, and that's good. But then use your gut and intuition and to think in a different direction, with an exclamation point. Maybe I'll start labeling my classes now with an exclamation point. No, my ego's not that big. But I think it's good to think that way sometimes. So, good and healthy. I don't know why I take a deep breath, because I'm so into the music and sharing this with you guys, so it's really fun. But that's why. So, okay, Esquivel. Thank you, Sebastian. Thank you for introducing me to him. Thank you, staff, clients, and friends joining us today. This was very, very fun. Love you guys. And tomorrow's film scoring results for the Fridays class. All right. Bye. The boulevard of broken dreams. Cha 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 cha.